All right. We'd like to say good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Any Given Sunday. This is your co-host, Coach 24, Darwin Penny, my co-host, the awesome voice, Brian Press, is here today. And behind the scenes, making sure that everything works out right, is Mr. George Walker, affectionately known as DJ Scatter.
And how are you doing today, Mr. Walker?
Well, I'm doing great, super fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome. And how are you doing today, Coach 24?
Oh, it's a good day. It's a good day.
So we had a guest, and due to unforeseen circumstances was unable to make it, but hopefully he will be here in another week or 2 or 3 weeks, because obviously next week he will not be here because he is as a former Royal, he will be at opening day, which is 1 week away, March 30th. And, you know, we have really been the last couple years, we've been kind of down. It's kind of like, all right, when is the Royals going to start playing bad? How much enthusiasm and hope this year do we have with new players and new coaching and new philosophy?
Well, I think there's a lot of excitement to go around. Certainly, the Royals have had a good spring training, most wins of anybody in Cactus or Grapefruit League. And so there's a renewed ambition, right? Because we've got some kids at the major league level, and I call them kids because they're so young, right? Our average opening day roster is going to be about 26 years of age, which is really, really young. When you look at who we could have at first base at Vinny Pascantino, this is just going to be his first full season in the majors at age 24. Second base is still kind of up for grabs, but if Michael Massey is playing over there, there's another 24-year-old, Bobby Witt Jr. This is going to be his age 22 season. Hunter Dozier will be the veteran of the bunch, and still, Hunter is still he's 28. Right, and so we'll be looking at him. Salvi, this is his age 32 season behind the plate. He is our veteran. When we look at left field, it could be Kyle Isabel playing left field, or he may wind up playing center field, depending on what they do in these last moves. And then certainly it could be a platoon situation, what we're looking at in right field.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of young guys. Brady Singer, who will probably get the opening day nod. He's going into his age 26 season. And so when we look at the Royals, there has to be some excitement because there's so much youthfulness. We've got a new manager. We've got a new pitching coach. We've got a new general manager, even though he finished out the season last year at J.J. Piccolo. J.J. now has a full season. He's had a full off season. And now all eyes are on him and the moves that he makes moving forward and trying to assemble the best competitive team, but at the same time being respectful of being a small market team, and we can't be the team that goes out and gets the huge big name free agents. And so I think there's renewed optimism. I think you're going to see a little bit of what you saw back in 2013, at the end of 2013. The Hosmers, the Mustakas, the Canes, and those guys were young guys just like these guys, starting to make their ascent and starting to make names for themselves at the major league level. And so what we're hoping is that this group would be very similar and start making their way to be contenders.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to it. I enjoy going out to the game. The one thing that I really want to see is I just want to see enthusiasm. I want to see them hustle. They don't have to win every game. They don't have to, I don't want them losing 100 games or 105 games. But if they just bring in the youth, they bring in the spark, they bring in excitement and bring the exuberant out to where it resonates through the fans and the fans get excited, that part will be good, because I feel that they could be definitely a playoff team within the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think we're a year behind schedule, and part of that is because of what happened in 2020, where we didn't have a full season. A lot of these guys were minor league players. They didn't have a minor league season.
Right.
The elite minor leaguers got an opportunity to be at what they call the alternate site, where you could pull players from because of what we were dealing with COVID restrictions. And so a lot of these guys missed, 500 plate appearances. And so they're trying to get back to where they should be.
Yeah.
A year later. But, hopefully, last year we lost 97 games. The year before we lost 88 games. We had only a 33 winning percentage in 2020. 18 and 19 were bad years where we lost over 100 games both of those years. And 2016 and 27, we were, 1 year. 2016 we were 81 and 81. In 2017 we were 80 and 82. So just hovering around 500 the first 2 years after the World Series in 2015.
Right. Yep. And so, Bobby Witt leads the team, him and Brady Singer, with Zach Greinke as a veteran presence that will help out the pitching staff. And I really did feel that he did help out the pitching staff last year. Now, maybe you didn't see it statistically wise, but I really thought that they got better. The one person that I was disappointed in was Brad Keller, and I'm really hoping that he will turn it around this year and have a very productive year.
Well, he's changed his arsenal a little bit, where he was primarily a sinker slider pitcher. This year he's going to add a curveball back to his repertoire in hopes that will be the thing that get him back off. You got to remember, when Brad Keller first came to us as a Rule 5 non-protected player, Brad Keller pitched really, really well. And somewhere along the way, in the last year and a half, he lost his confidence and he stopped being aggressive on the mound. And so he feels really good about that. Last year he wound up back in the bullpen versus being in the rotation. And so
Right.
I think this year we're going to try to start him back in the rotation, because he's really had a really good spring, and everything looks very positive for him. I think he's got that competitive edge back to him, and hopefully with this curveball added to his arsenal, it'll get him over the hump and get him back to some winning ways, and hopefully get us at least double-digit wins for us.
Now, let me ask you this. Since, Coach 24 is the aficionado because he played professional baseball, how much of Keller's inefficiencies was due to coaching?
Well, sometimes, first of all, let me say this: every coach that's on a major league staff has knowledge. The biggest challenge is, can you impart that knowledge and make it work for the person who's struggling, right? At this point, you've got to find those things that makes that player trigger. And will your philosophy in pitching work with what's natural to that particular player? And so I believe that part of it with him was just being able to control an inning after he had a bad inning. Don't make it two bad innings, right? Being able to do that. And so I do think that this younger generation of player learns a little bit different than the old player. And so the new staff that we have now is a little bit more analytics driven and able to hopefully speak the language of how these players have learned. They've learned through feedback through advanced analytics. And so hopefully this will be something that will springboard not only Brad Keller, but we're talking about Daniel Lynch. We're talking about Brady Singer. We're talking about all of these young men. Brady got it. Seemed like he got the ship right at the second half of the season last year, and we're hoping that will carry over, okay, into 2023. But the rest of the guys have got to make their mark. They've got to stamp their identity as full-fledged major leaguers and no longer prospects.
So, as a fan who is watching our show and not understanding what they mean by the analyticals, what is that in comparison to like the old school and Matt Matheny? So
the conversation now, whereas in older days we would talk about pitch sequence, pitch pattern. How is this guy setting his hitters up? Versus now, with all of the information that you have, they're going to say, well, how far is his vertical break, or my horizontal break is off? And so if my horizontal break is off, then this is the adjustment I need to make. Versus old days, we would validate by what we saw in coaching you up and saying your front shoulder is flying open. Well, now I want to know why my front shoulder is flying open, and there should be some metrics that go along with it, because I'm not throwing this percentage of strikes and this percentage of my fastball in this count. And so there's a lot. We've always been very analytical, but the analytics didn't drive the bus.
Right.
The analytics went along for the ride. In today's modern baseball, the analytics drive the bus because everybody wants to have some quantifiable evidence as to why I'm doing what I'm doing, not just your eyes.
In a sense, Billy Ball, that they or that.
Well, Billy Ball too stemmed around also how they were going to financially put a team together.
Right.
The A's and what they were able to do, and the guy put a high percentage on guys who got on base and walked a lot. So that's why today you see the advanced analytic now that bears the burden of proof of whether you're a good player now is on base percentage versus it used to be batting average.
Right.
Or OPS, your on base plus your slugging. And so those are now the stats that say quantifiably you score more runs if you're on base more. And I think there is some validity to that, but I've always said no matter how you get on, just as long as you get on.
Right.
Okay, I don't care about you. But in today's advanced metrics, walks have a far greater impact on who's in the lineup versus who's not in the lineup.
Absolutely. So now this year they have cut the shift out, though teams are still working on loopholes on how they can still do the shift by putting two outfielders back to back or whatever, stuff like that. But saying that, moving the pitching faster, getting the game moving and going, how does that benefit the Royals, and how does that help them in scoring more runs and giving the Royals a better chance of winning?
Well, I think one of the things is we've always had a staff for the most part, minus a couple of guys that worked quickly. As a matter of fact, I was watching the spring training game today, and watching Brady work, and I don't think he got under 8 seconds, but maybe about one pitch.
And
You know.
and how? What's the average? Isn't it 15 seconds
So
or?
you get 20 seconds from the
Okay.
time you receive the ball.
Okay.
So he was letting the ball go most of the time with 8 or 9 seconds still left.
Oh wow.
So he's a guy that works pretty quickly anyway. Gorky
Right.
is also a guy that works quickly. You know, if you go back to most pitchers that were pitch to contact type pitchers were guys who worked fast. You know, I'll go back to Roy Oswalt or Greg Maddux. Those guys, if they were matched up against each other, that was going to be about an hour and 45-minute game.
Right.
Those guys didn't mess around, and they threw a ton of strikes.
Right.
So I think how it's going to be the help for the Royals is those young hitters, as they're starting to learn, don't have to go through, well, there's three guys stacked up on this side of the infield for me. And a young guy, what that can do is get into his mind, into his psyche early in his career, where he's not as confident of that I'm a bona fide major league hitter. Well, maybe now a few of those balls squeak through, and the hitting slump is not as long. And I think that would such a young team could play a huge impact on just our guys growing in confidence. From a pitching standpoint, I think it's going to force us to be aggressive on the mound. Same thing. Young guys, unsure of themselves, tend to nibble a little bit instead of attacking the zone. I think this is going to make those guys be a little bit more aggressive, and I think that will allow our defense to play well behind us. We have the benefit of having a large ballpark, and so let's use that ballpark to our advantage by forcing the other team to have to put the ball in play, and so our defense can play well behind it.
Absolutely. So saying that, usually the Royals were not home runs. They weren't power teams. They were hit and run for a double or run for a triple. Is this team like that? You know, stealing bases. You know, playing small ball.
So if you had what I would call a power hitting team today, you'd have at least 4 or 5 guys that could hit you 25-plus home runs. I don't see that on this team, okay? I see 2 guys right now that if I was going to hang my hat today, well, 3 guys that will hit 25 home runs. I believe Salvador is going to hit 30-plus home runs. I believe Vinny Pasquantino will hit 25-plus home runs, and I believe that Bobby Witt Jr. will hit 25-plus home runs. There's a couple of other guys that have 20-plus home run potential. If he plays a full season with no injuries, Hunter Dozier could hit 25-plus home runs. And then I think the other person that possibly could do that in our lineup would be Kyle Isabel. I think, you know, he's shown some power, but he still may be a year or 2 away from getting to that type of power. Depending on who's going to be the other guys in the lineup, we expect, and I'm expecting MJ Melendez to be in the lineup. We know he has power because he hit 40 home runs his last full season in the minors, and so I believe that he could do that again this year. In a half a season last year, he hit about 16 home runs. So there's no reason to think that he won't hit 20 this year, barring some injury or anything like that. So I think that overall we're going to have to use our legs because we're young.
Right.
And so let's be aggressive on the bases. Our forte in the past has been that we were one of the teams that would run. We, this offseason, lost our fastest guy in Adalberto Mondesi, and we traded him for prospects. And so we'll see how it works out. But I think we are going to be aggressive on the bases based on what we've seen in spring training. But the other thing is that made the 14 and 15 team really good is their ability to go first to third or first to home, and challenge the defense by running everything out hard.
Right. And that's where the analytics also comes from. If you know that this guy doesn't have the greatest arm, you will challenge him. And if he throws me out, he throws me out. But he's going to have to do that. So now, let's go back to the World Baseball Classics.
Okay.
The U.S. was in the finals. They lost to Japan. And, ironically, it was Otani striking out Trout, teammates on the Angels, to give Japan their third World Baseball Classic title, and lost the U.S. from going back to back. How much does the World Baseball Classic enthusiates and I hope I said that right, enthusiates the fans this year, not just in Kansas City, but all across, because baseball fans have been really slacking for and possibly for a good reason, but they have not been as coming out. Does this help baseball?
I certainly think it does, because this was an exciting time. Matter of fact, I text one of my friends who was there, and I said to him, better atmosphere. Game 7 of the World Series, World Baseball Classic. He goes, not even close.
Wow.
He goes, the atmosphere here is unbelievable. One of the reasons why it was such a dynamic environment was because you had people from all different nationalities and all different countries bringing in their respective way that they, as fans, cheer in the stands.
Yeah.
You could see the Japanese contingency, because if you've ever watched a Japanese game, or if you watched the WBC when they were in Tokyo, and how the horns are blowing and they're hitting the sticks, and it's just like that. And then you also bring in the Latin America flavor from Venezuela and also Cuba, and it is very rhythmic and dancing and all that. And then certainly our fans, not to be outdone, started chanting USA, USA. Maybe we'll get us another chant, but that's our chant. You know?
Absolutely.
So,
and I enjoyed watching it.
Yeah. It was exciting to me. Obviously, I'm a baseball purist, but it was exciting to me to see all the things. I think probably the only negative thing I saw, and it was a freak accident, was we talked about last week with the reliever,
right,
who blew his knee out in the celebration
right
after the game. Right, but everything else about it, from the atmosphere, from the competitiveness, we saw electric stuff on the mound. We saw home runs. We saw stolen bases. We saw catchers throw guys out. We saw the best player, majority of the best players in the world on showcase.
Yeah.
Okay, and they didn't disappoint. How many of the games were one-run games or within 2 runs? The blowouts were early, and it was in the games against countries that you expected to get blowout, because they just don't have the rich history of baseball. And so it gave us an opportunity to see baseball on full display in a different format, okay, with the pride of your respective country at stake.
Right.
And that's the challenge for us really in baseball, is what's at stake in such a long season. Every game is not played like this is the last game, whereas what we saw there was do or die.
Right.
It's what makes people so giddy right now because of March Madness. It's do or die. It's win or go home.
Yeah.
And that's what we had in the WBC. Once we got down to that those final 4 teams, and it was win or go home. And, and then to have it where teammates are playing against each other.
Right.
That brings about something, because now there'll be something to talk about in that Angels clubhouse.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So saying that, with the one and done, win or go home, at least in the quarterfinals or semifinals, does baseball look at the playoffs that way, or will it stay with what they got right now?
I do think that baseball is going to have to look at it and see what can we draw to Major League Baseball from the excitement that was generated around the WBC. Okay, what can we bring from that? I don't think that you go to a one game format, because to me that's not how the regular season is played.
Right.
Okay, but could you have a shorter series in there, a 2 out of 3? I remember when the championship series used to be 3 out of 5,
Right.
and then the World Series was the best of 7.
Yeah.
Okay, could we make that? It's one thing that if I were commissioner for a day,
Yep.
the wild card would be a 2 out of 3. It wouldn't be a one game,
Now, why is that?
because it's not a, we don't play one game series during the season. We play at least a mini 3-game series.
Very good point.
So let's just make it a 2 out of 3. Okay?
So
I would be wild card round 2 out of 3, divisional stay at 3 out of 5. Same thing with the championship series, and as a best of 5, and then a best of 7 for the World Series. I'd still hold that format to it.
And that sounds great, but then the commissioner and everybody else goes, and I get that point, but if you're losing money by getting games that are boring and lasting 7 games or whatever, you got to fix this. So I see what you're saying, and you're absolutely right, but the upper management of the baseball and owners are going to say, no, we want to make more money. We don't care.
But we don't. But that's money that you don't know if you're going to make anyway, because it could easily be a 3-game sweep.
Right. Absolutely.
So
right.
The majority of the revenue that's generated around any of the major sports is through the TV package.
Yeah.
It's through the deal that they sign with the major networks to broadcast the games. Okay, it is not from butts in the seats. Okay,
there you go.
The television money is where it's at. So as long as those games are available for me to see,
right,
then that's where it's at. So I think if you want to extend the playoffs, shorten the season. Okay, shorten the season, and let's get into the playoff season a little bit sooner.
Right.
Right, because that, I think, to me, the thing that I if I could do, another thing as commissioner, is that we would split the season in half. Okay, so you'd have a first half champion, a second half champion, and then that would be your first round. Okay, because here's the thing is your fans are going to come back after the All-Star break. Okay, your fans stop coming to the stadium when you're 20 games out at the All-Star break. We got no hope.
Right.
We're out.
Right.
But if we're starting over again, okay, first half is behind us. We got renewed. So now those people who weren't going to come the second half now have a reason to come. To me, that's a format, that keeps some excitement. It's what makes the NFL is because everybody's still in halfway through the season. You haven't been mathematically eliminated.
Right.
Okay, it's too hard to come back from 20 games back at the All-Star break.
Right.
Okay, so what do teams start doing? You start trading off players, start selling off commodities, and start building for the next year.
Yeah.
Right. So it's what keeps people in and what keeps people engaged. Right. And unless you get to the halfway point of the NFL season at 0-8.
Right.
Your fan base is still engaged, man. Hey, we still got a chance.
Right.
We still got a chance, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, what did we get to? Probably week 13 or 14 before somebody was actually eliminated.
Yeah.
From contention.
Yeah, there was.
The Texans were eliminated pretty early.
And I think the Bears, and that was pretty much it. But everybody else was still in it up until the end.
And then we got down to the last week, right? And there were a plethora of teams that there were some weird scenarios that had to happen, but my fans are still there because we still got a chance, like Detroit, right? Here we are. We win our game, but we need 2 other teams to lose, and unfortunately, only one of them lost.
Right.
But that's what you need is how do I keep my fan base? How do I keep those people still coming and engaged after the All-Star break?
Oh, I totally agree, because it always seems like baseball is virtually the only sport, and I'm just talking about the four major sports, is the only sport where if you struggle in the beginning, you're SOL.
Right.
And then, just like the Royals have been going, they just go through the motions. Yes, they start playing good at the second half. So if you do your advice of first half, second half champs, the Royals would have been in chance for winning the division their division in the second half of the season. I remember 1981 where we had the strike. Oakland had won the first half of the division, then they split it up, and then the Royals turned around, won the second half. And even though Oakland did beat them in the playoff game, but that was still a good thing because, you only had four teams, two in the American, two in the National. This time it was four teams in each division. They played, and then they played again for the AL championship and then the World Series. So I like that idea, and baseball needs to start thinking of some way of building the fan base, because you get Pittsburgh, you get Miami, you get even Kansas City, and those cities are actually fans. Kansas City, you saw it in 14, 15, 16. They came out, they go, oh, Royals fans are not very good, blah, blah, blah. No, it was the product, and it was horrible. Now we've got hope. Let's give them even better hope by making that suggestion of first and second half. You have even in Babe Ruth's time, and we're talking 100 years ago, they were playing 154 games, which is only 8 games more than they're playing now. We need to do something, and if you're going to have to cut games.
And I agree with that. We were playing a 154-game schedule, but you won the pennant, and there was no championship series.
Right.
There was no divisional round. It was you won the pennant, you go to the World Series.
Right. Absolutely. So now you're wanting to get more people, more teams involved. But at that time, what was there? Only 16 teams in there, or 12 or something? There wasn't very many. Now you've got 30 teams, and they're having ideas of bringing in 2 more teams. So you're talking about 32 teams, and you only have a small handful of teams. You always see the Yankees, you always see the Dodgers, you always see the Astros. Every once in a while, a Padres team pops in there, or a Minnesota team pops in there. But this would give them absolutely more opportunity. By your suggestions, you need to have a talk with Mr. Manford.
Would love that opportunity. But the biggest lead that anybody's overcome, right? The 51
Right.
Giants
Yes.
were down like 13 games in August and come back
Right.
and go some like 40-7 over the last
Right.
2 months of the season to get it to a 1-game playoff
Right.
for the shot that was heard around the world with Bob
Exactly.
Thompson.
And if you've ever watched MASH, they have an episode with that in there. But saying that was 15 years before we were even born. So that should tell you how long that has been. So
the race that I remember, 2 races I remember, 93 Braves
right.
were 10 behind the Giants at the All-Star break, and they come back to win the division by 1 game on the last day. And then probably early June of 78, the Yankees were Yankees were down about 14 games out
of the Red Sox.
Get it to a 1 game, which is the famous game of Bucky bleeping Dent.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Hits the home run off Mike Torres.
Didn't Fisk hit a home run before then for the Red Sox?
Yeah. And so they were up in the game, and then
Yep.
Bucky bleeping Dent. 'Cause
Yep.
anybody that's a
Yep.
Red Sox fan, they don't refer to him as Bucky Dent. It's Bucky bleeping Dent.
Absolutely. So we are past halftime on any given show on KUAW. We're having a great show talking baseball. And when we get back for the second half, I'm going to ask you a baseball question that has something to do with football too. So we will be right back. All right, we are back for the second half of Any Given Sunday on KUAW. Coach 24 across from me, DJ Scatter running the show, and I am the awesome voice. 816-599-6893 is the phone number. If you would like to call in and speak your piece, have a question for any one of us, call in. And I was talking to, told you that we George and I had discussed just before you showed up about a question that has to do with baseball and football. Now, in football, they have, they're having the free agencies and bringing in players and everything else. Well, in baseball, you can have players that can work more than one position. So you've had Hunter Dozier playing third base. He's played first base. He's played outfield. Why does football have to have specialized players? Like you got a guy that has to play left tackle. If he can't play right tackle, but he can play left tackle or he can play right guard. Why is football more specialized than baseball?
I think it's more specialized for the starters. You'll see guys that are backup players that have versatility, a guy who can play both guard and tackle. But football tends to be a side dominant sport, right? We're dominant. We're always worried about the guy who's going to protect the quarterback. Some of it has to go along with the footwork that goes along with it. But I think at the end of the day, it's what they've created. What we created in baseball is a place for the utility, for the utility player. You remember Jose Akindo back in the day, and that
Right.
guy could go all over the field.
Right. He had one game where he played all 9 positions.
Right. And so there is versatility that's built into baseball, and it starts at a relatively young age, whereas football, they pretty much identify you as a lineman. You're a lineman or you're a back, and if you're the skinny kid, they put you out at receiver.
Yeah.
Your body type will dictate where you play,
Right.
really quick. And if you're the kid with the golden arm, then you get to play quarterback, or at least you got long hair.
Right.
So they put
Exactly.
you back there.
Exactly.
And so I think there is the other thing is you play both sides of the ball. You're both an offensive and defensive player when you play baseball, just like you do in basketball. As you notice now, guys in basketball are really becoming interchangeable. Where they
Yes.
used to be, this guy's a post player, this guy's a wing player. Now they're very, very hybrid at what they do, because you see a lot more of the bigger guys handling the ball. But football identifies you early in life, and they said you're over here. Now, whether you're right or left, I think becomes more of a specialized when you get older. But quarterbacks are predominantly right-handed.
Right.
And so it's easier for them to hand off with their left hand, and teams tend to dominate their run game to the right side.
Right.
Whereas they tend to be a little bit more finesse to the left side. You try to make it even, but your two best run blockers are on the right side, and your two best pass blockers are generally on the left side, the quarterback's backside.
So why has the last 2 teams tried to force Orlando Brown to be a left tackle, and now he's with Cincinnati, and I believe he is going to be the left tackle to Joe Burrow, where he had dominated so much on the right tackle side?
Well, I think part of it has been obviously those individual teams' philosophies and what they like to do, and maybe it felt like somebody they had better. The one thing that you usually try to look for in a prototypical left tackle is arm length. His arms are not prototypical length, right? And so if you look at, I'll say like Tyron Smith,
Right.
that guy is long,
Right.
right? You know, at 6'7" or 8",
Right.
but he's got just tremendously long arms, and that's what they really always look at after that. So I just think it's all about, you know, who else do we have that can play that position? We don't have anybody else can play that position, then you're the guy by default.
Right.
And we're gonna make you that guy. I think later in guys' careers too, injuries play a part in that. Guys kind of lose a step, and so you want that fresh young guy over there. Very similar. I'll say this to Tyler Smith. You know, where Dallas had him pegged to be a guard. All of a sudden, Tyron goes out. Now he's a tackle, and that versatility really helped.
Yeah.
I think later in the season, they wind up actually leaving him at left and putting Tyron at right. And I think that's where they may play this year. But they say they're going to put him with Steele coming back, they'll put Tyron at left, put him back at left guard, and just leave it at that.
Now, do you think that in the draft, Dallas will be draft heavy on the offensive line? Because they have been picking up defensive players, and they
Right.
did pick up Ronald Jones to replace Ezekiel Elliott at the running back.
First of all, he does not replace he replaces the roster spot. It's not like that. So I think they are also going to try to change a little bit of their running philosophy, that he probably fits a little bit more than what Zeke was to Pollard. They were very complimentary of each other, different running styles.
Right.
So, but I think they'll probably look at drafting. I think they may wind up drafting it at the linebacker position. Me personally, but or defensive tackle. their inside run game still is a little bit less to be desired. They're very good on the edge, but the inside run game, especially from the line, they really haven't been able to find a guy that's a plugger. And so I think that's probably where they'll go.
Gotcha. So, and next month on the 27th, in fact, the Thursday we have our show, we will have the NFL draft down in Kansas City. And speaking of that, on the 27th, we are going to have a guest. His name is D.L. Marshall. I don't know if you remembered him from the sport when we did the Sports Disciples. I know you've came in a couple of times, and he was doing the show, and then he left to coach. Now he does comedy and all that stuff. So, but as a former sports person, I was going to bring him in, and I've got some tickets to go to his show. So hopefully we'll have an interesting show that night. So just to let people know, this is still roughly 4 or 5 weeks from now. But he will be coming in, and hopefully our other Royals former Royal player comes in within the next week or two. We will also let you guys know on that too. Now, saying that, we're going to go to basketball, and tomorrow Kansas City will be hosting the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 with Houston playing Miami of Florida, and then Texas playing Xavier's. Texas, I would consider, is a local team because they played in the Big 12. They won the Big 12 tournament here in Kansas City a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So Kansas City is going to be in for a great weekend. That was some fantastic basketball. And I will say a little bit too, the women's are finally starting to get to where the number ones and number 2 seeds are not automatics anymore. They are starting to lose games too. I mean, outside of South Carolina, who I still think is going to be heavily favored to win. You've got those other teams that are coming in, the 15 seeds, the 16, the 14 seeds, coming in just like the men's. And Kansas is right now at the MSG, which is the Madison Square Garden, playing the Michigan State Spartans right now. And I have at halftime that K-State is up 5 on Michigan State, 43-38. So good luck, K-State. Yes, I am a Missouri fan, but, I do cheer for the locals. And if anybody says that I cheer for Kansas, I will deny it. But I do cheer for the local teams because, I am a fan. I am a Missouri fan, but I am a sports fan, and I love great sports, just like the guy across from me. So,
yep, that's the same way I am about anybody playing from the state of Texas.
There you go.
I'll be cheering them on. So I'm hoping that we'll have a regional final of Texas versus Houston.
Now saying that, what is Masser's chances of playing? Because he's been playing hurt, but they have been so far looking good enough to move on. But the games are going to get tougher and tougher.
Well, I think at the end of the day, this is what you prepare for, is that at any given time somebody could go down and you have to be ready. When you're dealing with soft tissue injuries, those things don't heal fast. And so I think the kid will probably try to gut it out, but the question will be how effective will you be, right? There's one thing to be able to do that. We saw that here, obviously, with Patrick in the playoffs with the bum ankle, but he was able to still be effective and to will himself to do that. With that in mind, one of the greatest stories of a guy willing himself. Unfortunately, we lost him this week, Willis Reed. Coming off of that knee injury to hit those shots to spur his team on to an NBA championship when he was with the Knicks, and so. sometimes it's not what the player can do, but just the fact that they make themselves available, and that will encourage the rest of the team to. We've got to do our part. We've got to pick up the slack.
I'll tell you what, Willis Reed to me was, in my opinion, the first time a person inspired to come back because his teammates thought he was done. The coaching thought he was done. And when he came out against the Lakers, and the Lakers were heavily favored to win that game, and when he showed up, and he only made one basket was it 2 baskets?
Mm-hmm. But they were the first 4 points of the game.
Oh, okay, of that half, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he scored those. He didn't have to score anymore because he was such an inspiration. And yeah, you got Kirk Gibson, and you've got all the other stories
we've
stuff.
Seen so many of those stories. I still remember the game against the Giants when Emmitt Smith played with a separated shoulder
Absolutely.
and carried the ball 35 times, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and then caught another 8 passes, and it was just a remarkable game. And he talks about, man, just hearing his shoulder crack.
You're right.
You know, we saw that. We saw Mahomes this year. I mean, I didn't think he was.
No.
I didn't think he was coming back.
No.
There was no way. And then not only be able to do it, but to be able to make a key play, not in the AFC Championship, and then make another key play in the Super Bowl when you're basically running on flat tires.
I still could not believe how he ran past that Eagles defense, and that Eagles defense was supposed to have been flying around and super speed and all this, and this. I'm going to call him a slow quarterback because he had a bum leg. As you said, he had a flat tire, and yet he still ran 26 yards, to get a first down and eventually run the clock out for him. And so, but Willis Reed is the first person that comes to the inspiration, and he was a phenomenal man, and he was well loved, and Tony Kornheiser talks highly about him because he was a New York fan. He was at that game as a fan. He wasn't even in radio or TV or anything else, and he just said that was it was amazing.
Right.
And to me, that was phenomenal. And so, rest in peace, Willis Reed. You were one class act, and you will be sorely missed.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got an update. K-State is now up. Well, now they're up 4. They were up 6, but now it's 50-46, and it is 16 minutes left. So they're pretty much at the 16-minute timeout that they have. So anyway, so we have soccer. Soccer right now they're struggling, but we've got the men's Final Four. So saying that, who do you think will go into the Final Four? We have Houston, Texas, Xavier, and Miami of Florida.
I believe Texas is going to win that region. They have played really, really good basketball. Sometimes it's about when you get hot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still reeling off their 20-point thrashing of the Jayhawks in the Big 12 championship game, which the Jayhawks have owned.
Right.
And not only did they beat them, they beat them soundly. They got by on a 5-point win on a stubborn Penn State team that was better than people expected, but they won their first round over Colgate by 20. So I think the Longhorns are playing really well. They've also had to overcome some adversity this year with their coach being let go in the middle of the season, things like that. And so I think those things have fueled that team. And all the pressure is on the University of Houston. Houston was in the Final Four last year. It's the first time they've been ranked number 1 since the Phi Slama Jama days, and so it's got everybody all excited in Houston, and rightfully so. But I think Texas's length and the injury we talked about could play huge factor in that 1 versus 2 matchup, which would be, I think, the only 1-2 matchup we could still actually have.
Absolutely. In fact, there's only one number 2. So there's a number 1 and number 2 in the Midwest.
We do have UCLA, who's a 2 also.
Right, but I was saying that they were the only
Yeah.
number 2, and Alabama the only number 1. Everybody else is 3 or higher.
Well, Texas is a 2.
Right, but I said Houston and Texas. They were 1
that's
and
only
2.
1-2.
Right.
Yeah, that's the only 1-2
Right.
we can get. The best we could get on the other side is we could get Alabama. They could get a 1 and an 8. That's the best. That would be the tightest matchup. But wow, wouldn't that be something if we have a 1 and a 15 playing in that?
Well,
in
I'll
that
tell you
Elite
what.
Eight game?
After watching Princeton, I would not doubt it at all.
I don't.
They
Especially- I believe that they can beat Creighton.
yeah, and they beat Missouri at Missouri's game.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri thrives on how they played, and yet Princeton not only took it to them, they took it to them very well. So,
Creighton was also a surprise. Like I said, it wasn't a big surprise to me that they beat NC State, but it was for me for them to beat Baylor. I didn't think they would beat Baylor.
Yeah, I didn't. I thought Baylor would have at least made it through the Sweet 16. And you've got UCLA and Gonzaga. You've got Arkansas and Connecticut. And I am not high on Connecticut. I know a lot of people are, but I think Arkansas, as long as they play the game that they played against Kansas, will take care of them. But as almost like Missouri, when Missouri was at their best, nobody could beat them. But when they were at their worst, they couldn't beat nobody. And so I think Arkansas can beat Connecticut. And you've got UCLA and Gonzaga. And then you've got Kansas and Michigan. And then the game after that, you've got Tennessee and Florida Atlantic. So you've got some great games going on there.
Florida Atlantic, a bit of a Cinderella story.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing was that kept them from being more Cinderella was who they beat.
Yep.
When they beat Farley Dickinson.
Yep.
And so it was Cinderella versus Cinderella.
Right.
And so, but this is what this tournament is about, and the transfer portal and having some guys that have played together 3 or 4 years have really, really changed the dynamic of what the NCAA tournament looks like.
Absolutely. So, and just real quick on the women's, you've got South Carolina in the Greensville division, and all 4 upper seeds are there. But you've got in the Seattle 4, you've got Louisville, the number 5 seed, versus Mississippi, an 8 seed, who took out the number 1, and I believe that was Stanford they took out. And then you've got Iowa, who arguably has the best player in women's basketball right now, playing Colorado. And then you've got Connecticut, which is also Seattle. So I guess they have Seattle and just Greensville, South Carolina. So Seattle 3, you've got Connecticut and Ohio State. You've got Tennessee and Virginia, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the other, Miami, Florida, who took care of, I believe it was Purdue or somebody like that. I can't remember offhand. But they have the number 2, number 3, and number 4 seeds. So, but I say South Carolina, and it won't even be close. They have just totally dominated.
Miami beat the 1 seed, which was Indiana.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Indiana.
Yeah. So they beat Oklahoma first round, and then they beat Indiana, who was the 1 seed. And so, yeah, I mean, it is becoming just as exciting as a men's game. Don Staley has done an unbelievable job there at South Carolina. An interesting story was that the coach who is Purdue's coach, when Purdue won their national championship way back, probably early 2000s, she gave Don Staley a piece of the net that they cut down. And she said, I want this to be your inspiration to win your national championship. you can give me that piece of net back when you win a national championship. And Dawn Staley never forgot that. And when she won her first national championship, she held up that. She says, I've been walking around with this in my pocketbook ever since she gave it to me. And so she goes, now, not only do I give it to a coach that I think has that ability, but to a lot of young coaches, and trying to encourage them like she encouraged me. And so, but she has built an unbelievable program there at South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll definitely have a chance to be the champions. And it's been a changing of the guard. When Pat Summitt left the game, and for a long time, Gino and his girls just owned it. Right. And then,
especially after Pat Summitt left.
Absolutely right. They were already dealing.
Right, they were already moving forward, and then once Pat left,
it's been a wrap. Gino's guy, but it was good to see somebody else. In the 1 year that Mississippi State snuck in there,
and
Baylor with Kim Mulkey, and then she leaves to go to LSU, and so it's been a lot of excitement around the women's game just as much as the men's game.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Dawn Staley did, and what she did, that to me typifies sports. That's what makes me fall in love with sports. So we are getting ready, and we are running out of time, but we will not run out of time on Penny for Your Thoughts.
So one of the things that we want to talk about today is certainly we hit on it a little bit earlier, the World Baseball Classic. But one of the things I want to highlight is what I believe is a changing of the guard, a passing of the torch. Many times in some of our signature events, like our Olympics or things like that, we have that passing of the torch. Many will remember in Barcelona, there was a passing of the torch through the Dream Team, an unofficial passing of the torch, but the league that once belonged to Larry Bird and Magic Johnson then transferred over to Michael Jordan. Well, I believe on the last out of the World Baseball Classic, the torch was passed to who had been the best player in Major League Baseball for the last decade, Mike Trout. The new best player in the world now is Shohei Ohtani. We saw a guy be dominant at the plate. We saw a guy be dominant on the mound. And for me, the World Baseball Classic couldn't have come to a better culmination for the guy who's been the man to now see 100 miles an hour from the guy who is the man now. And so we step aside to say we salute the changing of the guard from Mike Trout to Shohei Ohtani.
And I tip my cap. And with that, that is the end of Any Given Sunday, another fine, outstanding performance that we had. We will do this again, possibly next week. You may come in a little later because he will be there for the first opening day of the 2023 Royals, and go Royals. I brought my Ventura jersey just for that reason. Next week I may wear my Bobby Witt Jr. jersey. So with that, with Coach 24, Darwin Penny, DJ Scatter, George Walker, I am Brian Kress, the Awesome Voice. Be awesome, not angry, and you guys have a phenomenal sports weekend.